In the relentless fury of a midnight storm, a solitary figure makes a split-second decision that will shatter the quiet predictability of his carefully ordered life. Drenched and exhausted, he discovers a small, trembling creature huddled beneath the shelter of his property's overgrown bushes. What appears to be an abandoned puppy, desperate for warmth and safety. But as days pass, unsettling questions begin to emerge. The strange vocalizations in the dead of night, the calculating intelligence behind those watchful eyes, the complete rejection of play and domesticity. What exactly did this man rescue from the tempest? And what wild forces has he unwittingly invited into his home? Could the most extraordinary secrets sometimes hide in plain sight, waiting for someone to truly see them for what they are? Where are you watching this video? Please share and follow the story below so we can spread this warmth to every corner. The rain wasn't merely falling, it was orchestrating a full-blown assault on the world, a percussive symphony of chaos against Noah's aging sedan. Sheets of water, thick as curtains, hammered the asphalt, transforming the familiar suburban streetlights into blurry, impressionistic halos swimming in the deluge. Inside the car's worn interior, the air thick with the scent of damp upholstery and stale coffee, Noah felt momentarily suspended, cocooned from the elements. The rhythmic, frantic slap of the windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, their arcs clearing only fleeting glimpses of the drowned landscape. He just endured a 14-hour coding marathon, a deep dive into the labyrinthine guts of legacy software for a demanding overseas client. Debugging felt less like problem-solving and more like digital archaeology, excavating layers of outdated logic and cryptic comments left by programmers long gone. His eyes felt like sandpaper, glued open by caffeine and screen glare. A dull ache throbbed behind his temples, and his shoulders slumped with a bone-deep weariness that transcended mere physical fatigue. The thought of his house, the quiet solitude, the embrace of his favorite armchair, the amber glow of a modest whiskey neat, shimmered in his mind like a sanctuary. This quiet life, nestled on the edge of Asheville, was precisely what he'd sought after the implosion of his previous life in the sterile, competitive tech corridors of Silicon Valley. He traded ambition for autonomy, frantic networking for the quiet company of compiler logs and the whispering pines bordering his property. He killed the engine. The abrupt silence was profound, instantly filled and then overwhelmed by the roar of the storm outside. It sounded like the sky itself was tearing open. Taking a fortifying breath, Noah grabbed his worn leather jacket, a tangible link to that faster, louder past life, now relegated to functional use, and flung the car door open, using the jacket as a flimsy, inadequate shield against the immediate onslaught. The transition shocked his system. The air wasn't just wet, it was heavy, saturated with the primal smell of ozone, churned earth, and decaying leaves. It clawed at him, instantly soaking through the thick denim of his jeans, the chill sinking into his bones. He gasped, hunching his shoulders, and began a desperate sprint towards the faint, welcoming beacon of his porch light. Keys, slick with rainwater, fumbled in his grasp as his sneakers squished and slid on the saturated lawn. Each step an exertion against the sucking mud and driving wind. Puddles, invisible in the gloom, erupted around his ankles. Halfway across the lawn, a sound thin and impossibly fragile pierced the storm's deafening wall of noise. A whimper, high-pitched, desperate. Noah stopped dead in his tracks, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead and streaming into his eyes. He stood frozen, a solitary figure buffeted by the elements, straining to listen. Water dripped from his chin, tracing cold paths down his neck. Had the wind played tricks on his exhausted mind? The relentless drumming of rain on the roof, the gurgle of overflowing gutters, the groan of ancient oaks swaying violently overhead. The world was a maelstrom of sound. But then it came again, fainter this time, nearly swallowed by a particularly vicious gust, yet unmistakable. a desolate cry of pure misery that resonated with a frequency below hearing, vibrating somewhere deep in his chest, bypassing the tired logic that screamed for shelter. It plucked at a chord of loneliness he usually kept muted beneath layers of code and routine. Reason warred with instinct. Get inside. Dry off. Ignore it. It's probably just a raccoon or a cat caught out. But the sound so utterly helpless snagged on his conscience. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe the residue of a protective instinct he hadn't needed to exercise in years, won out. He turned away from the magnetic pull of the warm, dry house and pivoted toward the source of the sound, towards the overgrown, shadowy boundary line of his property where the manicured lawns surrendered to tangled woods. His sneakers sank deeper into the sodden earth as he navigated towards the massive rhododendron bushes that formed a natural fence. Their broad, waxy leaves, weighted down by gallons of water, drooped low, creating lightless, cave-like pockets beneath. The air here was even thicker, carrying the scent of wet mulch and something else, something faintly musky and animal. There, tucked deep beneath the largest bush, pressed against the damp earth in a desperate bid for shelter, was a small, dark, trembling shape. Noah approached with infinite caution, his movements measured, deliberate. He crouched low, ignoring the cold water immediately seeping through the knees of his jeans and the sharp prickle of wet leaves against his skin. The creature was impossibly small, curled into a fetal ball, shivering with a violence that seemed too great for its tiny frame. Its fur, or what he could see of it beneath layers of mud and plastered leaves, was dark and matted. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw two small eyes reflecting the distant porch light, luminous and wide with stark terror. They fixed on him, unblinking. It looked for all the world like a puppy, a newborn or very young, discarded puppy. The thought solidified instantly, overriding any flicker of doubt, any logical question about circumstance or origin. A wave of fierce, protective empathy surged through him, sharp and unexpected, momentarily eclipsing his own discomfort. The cynical programmer, the solitary hiker, vanished, replaced by something simpler, more primal. "Hey there, little guy," Noah murmured, pitching his voice low and soft, barely audible above the rain's roar, but aiming for a soothing cadence. "Shh, it's okay. You're okay now." He kept his movements minimal, wanting to project harmlessness. "Terrible night to be out here all alone, isn't it?" He extended a hand slowly, palm up, letting the cold rain wash over his skin, offering a non-threatening gesture. "Come on, it's warm inside. Let's get you out of this." The creature flinched violently at the movement of his hand, pressing itself harder against the dirt. A low, guttural whine vibrated from its chest, a sound of pure fear. But it didn't bolt. It watched his hand, then his face, its gaze flicking rapidly between them, a tiny brain seemingly calculating immense risks. Assess threat, assess promise, shelter versus danger, warmth versus the terrifying unknown. Millennia of instinct warred with the immediate crushing need for survival. Driven by the relentless cold, the hammering rain, the sheer desperation for relief, it made its choice. A hesitant, trembling step forward, then another. Its tiny dark nose twitched, sampling the alien scent of human, rain, and leather. Finally, with infinite caution, it stretched its neck and nudged the tip of its nose against his outstretched fingers. The contact was feather-light, tentative. A profound sense of relief washed over Noah, warming him despite the chill. Carefully, mindful of its fragility, he scooped the creature up. It was startlingly light, hardly more than a handful of bones and soaked fur. He cradled it against his chest, feeling the frantic hammering of its tiny heart against his own ribs. Quickly, he shrugged out of his leather jacket, ignoring the fresh wave of icy rain against his back, and wrapped the shivering bundle securely within its folds, cocooning it in relative warmth and darkness. Turning his back to the biting wind, clutching his precious, unexpected cargo, he hurried towards the sanctuary of the house, the small weight in his arms, both a sudden, heavy responsibility and a strangely grounding comfort against the wildness of the night. Crossing the threshold into his house was like stepping into another dimension. The immediate cessation of the wind's howl and the rain's roar was almost jarring. Inside, the air was warm, still carrying the comforting, layered sense of home. The dry, earthy aroma of seasoned oak logs stacked by the fireplace. The fainter, sweeter fragrance of the Earl Grey tea he'd brewed hours ago and forgotten. The subtle vanilla notes from a candle burning low on the mantelpiece and underlying it all. The clean, green scent of his multitude of houseplants, ferns, philodendrons, a stoic fiddle leaf fig, his quiet, leafy companions. Mellow jazz, the cool, intricate lines of a Bill Evans trio recording, drifted softly from the Bluetooth speaker nestled amongst books on the shelf. It was Noah's curated soundtrack for solitude, usually played for the plants, he joked to himself, but really for the quiet it instilled in the space, a counterpoint to the often chaotic logic of code. He moved towards the hearth, where embers glowed warmly from the afternoon's fire. Grabbing a thick, plush towel from the linen closet in the hallway, one reserved for guests he rarely had, he gently unwrapped the creature from his jacket and set it down on the soft terry cloth. It immediately tried to curl back into a tight ball, trembling renewed now that the immediate threat of the storm was gone, replaced by the overwhelming strangeness of this new environment. Noah knelt beside it, speaking softly, reassuringly. "Okay, little fella, let's get you dry." He began to carefully towel dry the animal, his touch gentle but firm, working through the matted fur, dislodging mud and debris. As the layers of grime came away, revealing the coat beneath, Noah's initial certainty began to fray at the edges. The fur wasn't uniformly dark as he'd first thought. It was a strange tapestry of dark brown, almost black, overlaid with irregular, blurry spots and blotches of a lighter tan. It was coarse, almost bristly in texture, not the soft down of a typical puppy. And the pattern, it didn't quite resolve into the familiar stripes of a brindle or the clear spots of a Dalmatian. It was more chaotic, asymmetrical. He paused, rubbing a particularly stubborn patch of mud near the creature's shoulder. Its ears, now that they weren't plastered down by rain, were strikingly large and rounded, standing almost comically tall on its small head. Its muzzle seemed longer, more tapered than any puppy breed he could readily call to mind. And the tail, short, surprisingly bushy, and tipped with black, wasn't the whip-like tail of a terrier or the hopeful plume of a retriever. He cataloged the oddities, his analytical mind trying to fit them into known categories. A stray? Definitely. Malnourished? Clearly. He could feel the ribs sharp beneath the damp fur. But what kind? He pushed the unsettling observations aside, defaulting back to the most plausible explanation. A severely neglected, possibly mixed-breed puppy, its appearance distorted by its ordeal. Trauma and starvation could do strange things to an animal's looks. Dr. Vance would know tomorrow. The creature let out another whimper, softer this time, a clear signal of need. Hunger. Of course. Noah stood up, his damp clothes clinging uncomfortably, and padded into the kitchen. The sleek, minimalist space, stainless steel, butcher block countertops, felt worlds away from the primal scene he'd just participated in. He bypassed the expensive, scientifically formulated puppy kibble he kept on hand for his sister's occasional visits with her hyperactive spaniel. This little one needed something gentler, easier to digest. He warmed a small amount of organic whole milk, a rare indulgence for his coffee, on the stove, careful not to overheat it. Rummaging in the fridge, he found the leftover grilled chicken breast from his solitary dinner. He shredded a small portion into tiny, easily manageable pieces. He combined the milk and chicken in a shallow ceramic bowl, one normally used for creme brulee. Returning to the living room, he placed the bowl carefully on the floor near the towel. The creature eyed the offering with intense suspicion for a beat, its nose twitching rapidly, sampling the unfamiliar scents. Then, hunger overwhelmed caution. It lunged forward, not with the clumsy eagerness of a puppy, but with a startling, focused ferocity. It lapped the milk greedily, its small tongue working with surprising speed, then devoured the shredded chicken in frantic gulps. Its whole body tense with the effort. The intensity was unnerving, less like eating, more like desperate refueling. Within 30 seconds, the bowl was licked clean. Having satisfied its immediate desperate hunger, the creature seemed to gain a sliver of composure. It sat back on its haunches and began grooming itself with meticulous, almost obsessive diligence, its rough tongue working vigorously over its strange coat, smoothing the damp fur, trying to restore some semblance of order. Its movements were quick, efficient, lacking the playful clumsiness Noah associated with puppies discovering their own limbs. Noah finally shed his wet clothes, changing into dry sweatpants and a worn university hoodie. He added another log to the fire, sinking into his deep leather armchair with a sigh that was part fatigue, part relief, part profound bewilderment. He pulled an old hand-knitted quilt over his legs, the familiar weight comforting. From this vantage point, he watched his unexpected guest. Finished with its grooming, the creature didn't explore the room, sniff the furniture, or try to engage with Noah. Instead, it sat upright on the towel, perfectly still, and scanned its surroundings. Its head moved in small, jerky movements, its large ears swiveling independently, capturing the crackle of the fire, the sigh of the wind easing outside, the faint whisper of the jazz music. Its eyes, dark and unnervingly intelligent, moved deliberately, assessing the flickering firelight, the deep shadows pooling in the corners of the room, the inert shapes of furniture, the quiet, unmoving form of Noah himself in the armchair. There was an eerie self-possession about it, a watchful stillness that felt ancient and deeply ingrained. It radiated an aura not of domestic dependence, but of wild vigilance. Where in God's name had it come from? Noah's property backed onto a substantial tract of state-managed woodland, part of the sprawling Pisgah National Forest that draped the Blue Ridge Mountains. But these woods, while home to deer, black bears, coyotes, and foxes, were not known habitats for whatever this was. Had it been dumped? People did cruel things, abandoning unwanted pets, especially on remote roads bordering the forest. Or had the storm, a particularly violent one, washed it down from higher elevations, perhaps from some hidden place, some illegal private menagerie? The questions piled up, heavy and unanswerable in the quiet room. He reaffirmed his decision. Doctor Eleanor Vance, first thing in the morning. She was sensible, experienced, unflappable. She'd identify the breed, scan for a microchip, perhaps offer some insight into its condition beyond starvation. Maybe there were frantic owners searching, posting flyers, heartbroken. He clung to that possibility, the neatest, most conventional solution. For tonight, however, the mystery would have to wait. Exhaustion, sharp and undeniable, finally began to claim the creature. It circled the towel twice, a tight, instinctive rotation, then collapsed into a dense curl, tucking its long nose beneath its bushy tail. A tiny sigh, like escaping steam, puffed from its nostrils. Its breathing deepened, evening out into the steady, vulnerable rhythm of sleep. Noah watched the rise and fall of its small flank in the flickering firelight, the flames casting shifting patterns of gold and shadow on its unusual coat. A profound quiet descended, broken only by the gentle crackle and pop of the burning logs and the now distant grumbling echo of the retreating thunder. he felt an unexpected, powerful wave of protectiveness towards this small, alien being sleeping trustingly by his hearth. Its sudden, dramatic arrival felt like a stone tossed into the still pond of his meticulously ordered life, the ripples already spreading outwards, altering the familiar contours of his solitude. He hadn't invited this intrusion, this complication, but as he watched the sleeping creature, a strange sense of responsibility settled over him, heavy and warm as the quilt on his lap. This tiny, tempest-tossed mystery was his, at least for now. Saturday morning dawned indecently bright and cheerful, a stark, almost mocking contrast to the furious chaos of the previous night. Sunlight, clear and sharp, poured through the large living room window, illuminating swirling dust motes in its beams and making the damp patches on the lawn glitter like scattered diamonds. The air, washed clean by the storm, smelled fresh and alive, carrying the scent of pine needles and wet earth from the nearby woods. It felt like the world had been reset, scrubbed clean, holding its breath in the aftermath. Noah, creature of habit, attempted to adhere to his usual Saturday ritual, seeking normalcy in the face of the extraordinary event of the night before. The 5-mile loop trail he favored in the Pisgah National Forest, just a 15-minute drive away, was his church, his therapist's office, his reset button. Normally, the rhythmic crunch of his hiking boots on the trail, the challenging inclines that burned his thighs, the scent of damp loam and decaying leaves, the eventual reward of the panoramic vista from the rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. These things cleared his head, untangled the knots of complex code, and grounded him in the physical world. Today, however, the familiar path felt different. His focus, usually turned inward or absorbed by the minutiae of the forest floor, kept snapping back to the small, strange creature currently sleeping soundly, he hoped, back in his living room. He found himself noticing things with a new, heightened awareness. A pile of disturbed leaves, deer passage, a faint track in the mud beside a stream, raccoon, or maybe something larger. The sharp cry of a hawk circling overhead seemed more predatory, less picturesque. The familiar woods suddenly felt deeper, wilder, holding more secrets than he'd previously considered. His suburban home, usually a distinct entity separate from the wilderness it bordered, now felt like a permeable membrane, a place the wild could, and clearly did, breach. He cut the hike short, the usual meditative peace elusive, replaced by a restless anxiety to get back. Back home, after a quick shower that failed to wash away his unease, and a breakfast of scrambled eggs and strong, black coffee consumed while standing at the kitchen counter, Noah turned his full attention to his houseguest. It was awake, no longer on the towel by the fireplace, but sitting silently, almost formally, in the exact center of the living room rug. It watched him approach with those unsettlingly intelligent, unblinking dark eyes. It hadn't whined, hadn't scratched at the door, hadn't explored or caused any destruction. It had simply waited, observant and still. "All right, little stormtrooper," Noah said, forcing a cheerful tone that sounded false even to his own ears. He'd settled on the name Storm during his abbreviated hike. It fit the circumstances of their meeting, yes, but it also captured something of the creature's contained intensity, the feeling of barely suppressed wildness. "Time for your field trip. Let's go see Doctor. Vance, figure out who you are, and if someone's missing you." He approached slowly, holding out a peace offering, a brightly colored plush hedgehog toy he'd found buried in a storage box filled with unwanted Christmas gifts and relics of past relationships. "Look," he offered tentatively, "something to chew on." Storm regarded the hedgehog with utter indifference. It gave the toy a cursory sniff, its nose twitching delicately, then dismissed it entirely, turning its gaze pointedly back towards a large picture window that overlooked the backyard and the woods beyond. A flicker of movement, a blue jay landing on the bird feeder, captured its absolute attention. Its ears swiveled, its body tensed slightly, but there was no playful bark, no inquisitive whine, no tail wag, no pounce. Nothing remotely resembling the enthusiastic, easily distractible behavior of any puppy Noah had ever encountered. The knot of unease in Noah's stomach tightened into a cold fist. This wasn't just trauma. This wasn't just being feral. This felt fundamentally different. He pushed the thought away again, clinging to Occam's razor. The simplest explanation, lost, traumatized puppy, was probably the correct one. His limited experience wasn't a reliable data set. Fashioning a workable harness and leash proved challenging. He retrieved some retired climbing gear, sturdy webbing, a couple of carabiners, a length of accessory cord. Storm endured the process with a stoic, rigid tolerance that was almost more unnerving than resistance would have been. It stood stiffly as Noah carefully looped and secured the webbing around its small torso, making no attempt to help or hinder, simply watching his hands with intense focus. Getting Storm into the car was another exercise in passive resistance. It didn't fight him, but it wouldn't move towards the open car door either. Noah ended up gently lifting the surprisingly dense little body onto the passenger seat, which he'd covered meticulously with old towels. Once inside, Storm didn't excitedly sniff the vents or look out the window with canine curiosity. It immediately settled into the footwell, curling into a tight ball, facing away from Noah, a small, self-contained unit of otherness. The 15-minute drive to Hendersonville Veterinary Clinic felt interminably long. Noah's mind raced, rehearsing his explanation, anticipating Dr. Vance's reaction. He pictured her kind, competent face, her gentle hands examining Storm. He visualized her locating a microchip, making a call, initiating a happy reunion. This neat, tidy resolution felt increasingly crucial, a way to restore order to his suddenly disrupted life. He glanced down at the footwell. Storm appeared to be asleep, or perhaps just feigning it, utterly still. He pulled into the clinic's small parking lot. It was quieter than he expected for a Saturday morning. Only 2 other cars. He unclipped Storm's makeshift leash, lifted the creature out. It remained limp, unresisting, and headed for the entrance, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully as he entered. The waiting room was small, clean, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and nervous animals. An elderly woman sat knitting, a chihuahua snoozing peacefully in a carrier at her feet. A young man scrolled through his phone, occasionally murmuring to a large ginger cat lounging disdainfully in another carrier. Chloe, the receptionist, a warm, bubbly woman whose brightly colored scrubs always seemed to match her mood, looked up from her computer, a welcoming smile already forming. "Morning, Noah. Well, who's this little surprise?" Chloe's smile was genuine, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she took in the bundle in Noah's arms. "Morning, Chloe," Noah managed, shifting Storm's weight. The creature felt heavier now, denser, sort of a rescue from last night's storm. Was hoping Dr. Vance could take a quick look, check for a chip, maybe tell me what kind of, dog this is? The hesitation was involuntary. Chloe's smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine sympathy. "Oh, Noah, honey, I'm so sorry. You didn't hear? Dr. Vance had a family emergency up in Ohio. Her mom's gravely ill. She got a call late last night and had to fly out first thing this morning. Everything happened so fast." Noah felt a physical pang of disappointment, sharp and disproportionate. "Oh, wow. I hope her mom's okay." He paused, regrouping. Is there anyone else covering? Just for a checkup?" Chloe shook her head regretfully, adjusting the bright pink glasses perched on her nose. "Afraid not today, hon. It's just me and Isabel doing basic tech stuff. Vaccinations, flea treatments, that sort of thing. Dr. Bellwether, the new vet who's taking over Dr. Reynolds' practice, he's supposed to be excellent, but he doesn't officially start until Monday, came highly recommended from the university program." She lowered her voice slightly. "Between you and me, it's probably for the best, doctor. Vance is gone for a bit. She needed a break anyway, Bless her heart. The anticlimax was crushing. Noah had banked everything on this visit on Dr. Vance's expertise providing swift, simple answers. Now he was facing more waiting, more uncertainty, alone with this increasingly baffling creature. He looked down at Storm, who had lifted its head and was now observing the sleeping chihuahua in its carrier with an unnerving, laser-like focus, ears swiveling almost imperceptibly. "Okay, well, thanks, Chloe. Please tell Dr. Vance I am thinking of her when you talk to her." He turned to leave, the weight of Storm in his arms feeling heavier than just its physical mass. It felt like the weight of responsibility, of unanswered questions, of a mystery he was ill-equipped to solve. Back in the car, the silence seemed amplified. Noah started the engine, the rumble feeling intrusive. He glanced in the rear-view mirror as he backed out of the parking spot. Storm, settled back into the footwell, lifted its head slightly. For a brief second, their eyes met in the reflection. Storm's gaze wasn't fearful or curious or even hostile. It was appraising, deep, steady, and unnervingly intelligent. A cold prickle traced its way down Noah's spine. The simple explanation, "lost puppy," felt not just flimsy now, but fundamentally, disturbingly wrong. The drive home was filled with a new kind of silence, one thick with unspoken questions and the growing certainty that he was dealing with something far outside his realm of understanding. The days following the aborted vet visit bled into one another, settling into a disquieting pattern that chipped away at Noah's carefully constructed routines and peace of mind. He tried to work, sequestering himself in his home office, a minimalist space dominated by 2 large monitors and the hum of his custom-built PC. But concentration proved elusive. His code, usually elegant and efficient, became clunky, riddled with minor errors he'd normally catch instantly. His focus was fractured, constantly snagged by the presence of Storm. The creature's behavior didn't normalize. If anything, it became more pronounced, more alien. The list of anomalies Noah mentally compiled grew longer, each observation adding another layer to the enigma. The pacing was relentless. Every morning, as the first hint of dawn filtered through the blinds and Noah stumbled toward the coffee maker, Storm would already be awake, not greeting him with yips or tail wags, but commencing its patrol. Back and forth, across the length of the living room rug, its steps eerily precise, its head low, like a tiny furry guard surveying its perimeter. The path became visibly worn on the Berber carpet within days. Its interaction with the domestic environment was minimal and strange. It ignored the comfortable dog bed Noah had purchased online, after realizing the towel wasn't a permanent solution, preferring to rest on the cool tile of the entryway or directly on the floorboards, often positioned strategically where it could observe multiple points of entry. It showed zero interest in the television, the jazz music Noah played, or the sounds of cooking from the kitchen. The doorbell, however, elicited a sharp, instant reaction, not barking, but a low, almost silent tensing of its entire body, ears flattened, eyes fixed intently on the front door, until the perceived threat, usually the mail carrier or a delivery driver, had passed. Toys remained objects of utter indifference. Noah had tried everything: squeaky vinyl bones, durable rubber Kongs filled with peanut butter, soft plush animals, even knotted ropes for tug-of-war. Storm would sniff them once, perhaps nudge them cautiously with its nose, then turn away, its attention inevitably drawn back to the windows or the subtle scents and sounds filtering in from outside. It was as if the very concept of play as understood by domestic animals was entirely foreign. Eating remained a focused, almost desperate act. Storm devoured the kibble Noah provided, now mixed with raw hamburger or scrambled eggs to ensure adequate nutrition based on frantic online research about picky eaters, with alarming speed, then immediately withdrew, leaving no trace of sociability or gratitude. It drank water frequently, lapping from its bowl with quick, darting tongue movements. but it was the sounds and the silences that truly unnerved Noah. Storm was preternaturally quiet most of the time. No attention-seeking whines, no playful barks, no contented sighs. Just a profound, watchful silence. Until the deep hours of the night, the howling became a nightly ritual, usually commencing between 2 and 4 a.m., when the house was utterly still and the world outside surrendered to darkness. Noah, a light sleeper at the best of times, would lie rigid in bed, listening. It wasn't howling as he knew it. It began with a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate up from the floorboards, then escalated into a series of drawn-out, whooping cries, interspersed with strange, high-pitched giggles and unnerving cackles. The sounds echoed through the silent house, alien and deeply unsettling, scraping at Noah's nerves. They spoke of vast, open spaces under a moon Noah couldn't see, of pack dynamics he couldn't comprehend, of a wildness utterly incongruous with his quiet suburban street. He started closing his bedroom door, then stuffing a towel along the bottom edge, a futile attempt to muffle the nightly serenade that left him feeling jumpy and sleep-deprived. He found himself researching soundproofing materials online at 3 a.m., a sure sign his carefully balanced life was tilting off its axis. One afternoon, desperate for some kind of external validation or explanation, Noah turned to his blog. He hadn't posted much beyond basic updates since the initial flurry of interest. Now, fueled by caffeine and mounting anxiety, he decided to escalate. He spent an hour capturing clearer video footage. Storm's metronomic pacing, its intense focus on a deer grazing at the edge of the woods, its complete rejection of a proffered tennis ball, even a carefully edited snippet of the bizarre nocturnal vocalizations recorded on his phone. The quality was poor, but the strangeness came through. He wrote a long, detailed post, meticulously cataloging every anomaly he'd observed over the past week. He listed the physical characteristics, the rounded ears, the spotted coat, the sharp teeth he'd glimpsed during a yawn, the sloping back. He described the behaviors, the pacing, the lack of play, the surveillance, the unique sounds. He titled the post, "Update, My Puppy, Mystery Deepens, Expert Opinions Needed." He embedded the new videos and photos. He hit publish with a sense of trepidation, bracing himself for the renewed influx of speculation. The reaction dwarfed the previous one. The clearer evidence, particularly the audio clip, sent the comments section into overdrive. The weird Chihuahua mix theories evaporated. Wolf-dog hybrid suggestions gained traction alongside increasingly confident claims it was a coyote or fox kit, though the spot still puzzled people. That howl is not canine. Listen to the pitch changes. Sounds more like something exotic. The way it holds its head when watching that deer, very predator-like focus. Noah, I'm a wildlife biologist, retired. Those spots combined with the build and the vocalizations, it's ringing alarm bells. Have you considered contacting wildlife resources? Dude, that's no dog, seriously. Look up African wild dog pups, maybe? Or something even weirder. Okay, that laughing sound in the audio, that's freaky. Almost sounds like, no, couldn't be. The blog post was shared across social media platforms, picked up by regional news aggregators, even mentioned on a couple of obscure podcasts dedicated to strange phenomena. Noah found himself inundated with emails, direct messages, friend requests. His quiet digital corner had become a public forum for the bizarre. Amidst the noise, a few more informed voices began to emerge. Someone linked a scientific paper on canid vocalizations. Another shared photos comparing skull shapes of various wild canids. A user identifying themselves as a former zookeeper commented cautiously, "The morphology, particularly the slope of the back and the rounded ears, combined with those specific vocalizations, it strongly suggests a non-native species. Possibly escaped exotic pet trade? You need professional identification ASAP. This is beyond internet diagnosis. The growing consensus, the sheer volume of concern mixed with avid curiosity, solidified Noah's resolve. The unease had blossomed into full-blown anxiety, bordering on fear. Not necessarily fear of Storm, who remained non-aggressive, but fear of the unknown, fear of the consequences, fear of harboring something potentially illegal or dangerous without understanding it. He looked at Storm, currently sitting sentinel by the window, silhouetted against the afternoon light. A small, potent concentration of wildness contained within his four walls. The online speculation was a deafening echo chamber. He needed facts. He needed doctor. Bellwether. He picked up the phone and dialed the clinic again, his heart hammering against his ribs. The appointment was made for the following afternoon. Whatever the truth was, he felt a desperate need to finally confront it. The day of the second vet appointment arrived, wrapped in a tense, electric anticipation. Noah felt jumpy, on edge, his sleep the previous night having been even more fragmented than usual, punctuated by Storm's particularly long and varied vocal performance around 3 a.m. He'd heard a neighbor's dog bark in response for the first time, a sharp, questioning sound cutting through the darkness, which only amplified his anxiety. What if someone complained? What if animal control showed up before he could get Storm properly identified? He tried to work in the morning, staring blankly at lines of Python code that seemed to mock his inability to solve the biological puzzle pacing relentlessly just beyond his office door. Around 10, he was pulled into a mandatory Zoom meeting with the demanding overseas client whose project he'd been wrestling with. He quickly shut his office door, hoping Storm would remain quiet. Midway through the client's passive-aggressive critique of a recent deployment, Storm let out a series of loud whooping calls from the living room, clearly audible through the door. "Mr. Carter," the client's voice, Mr. Moreau's voice, crackled through the speakers, dripping with faux concern. "Is everything all right there? It sounds like you have some rather exotic wildlife in your home office." Noah's face flushed. No, sorry about that, Mr. Moreau. Just the neighbor's dog, very loud beagle." He lied quickly, unconvincingly, clicking furiously to mute his microphone, his heart pounding with embarrassment and the stress of the near exposure. This situation was becoming untenable. Getting Storm ready felt like preparing for an expedition into hostile territory. He reinforced the makeshift harness with extra loops of webbing and used a sturdy carabiner to attach the leash this time. He packed extra towels, a bottle of water, and, on a whim, a few pieces of jerky Storm had shown interest in, hoping maybe it could be used as a high-value bribe if needed. Storm submitted to the harnessing with the same unnerving passivity as before, but Noah sensed a heightened tension in the small body, a vibrating alertness. The drive to the clinic was a silent ordeal. Noah gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He kept glancing at Storm, who sat bolt upright on the passenger seat this time. Noah had decided the footwell was too confining, potentially increasing anxiety. Staring fixedly out the windshield, ears constantly swiveling. Every passing car, every distant siren seemed to sharpen its focus. Noah found himself breathing shallowly, his stomach churning with a nauseating mix of dread and desperate hope for resolution. He pulled into the clinic parking lot, relief washing over him as he saw fewer cars than the previous Saturday. It was mid-afternoon, perhaps a lull between the morning rush and evening appointments. He took several deep breaths before turning off the engine. "Okay, Storm," he murmured, his voice tight. "Let's do this. Stay calm, please." He clipped on the reinforced leash, opened the passenger door, and gently coaxed Storm out. The creature hesitated, sniffing the air warily, its nose twitching, sampling the complex olfactory tapestry of the clinic. Disinfectant, dog, cat, fear, illness. Noah kept a firm grip on the leash, murmuring reassurances. The bell above the clinic door seemed deafeningly loud as they entered. The waiting room was indeed less crowded. But the atmosphere felt instantly charged by their arrival. A woman reading a magazine looked up over her glasses, her eyes widening slightly as she took in Storm. A teenage boy listening to music pulled out his earbuds, staring openly. Even Chloe at the front desk, though smiling professionally, had a flicker of intense curiosity in her eyes. A woman with a nervous-looking dachshund tucked under her arm murmured something to her companion, Frank, her eyes wide as she subtly gestured toward Storm. "Frank, look at the markings on that thing. Never seen anything like it." Frank, a stocky man holding the leash of a placid golden retriever, gave Storm a brief, scrutinizing look, his brow furrowed in thought, before quickly averting his gaze when he caught Noah watching. "Hi, Noah, Doctor. Bellwether is ready for you," Chloe said, her voice efficient but her gaze lingering on Storm. "Exam room 3, down the hall." Noah nodded, his mouth dry. He gently tugged the leash. "Come on, Storm." They started down the short hallway. Doors to other exam rooms were closed, muffling the sounds within. Storm walked stiffly beside Noah, hugging his leg, glancing nervously at the closed doors. They reached exam room 3. The door was slightly ajar. Noah could see the edge of the stainless steel examination table inside. He pushed the door open wider. "Hello?" And then it happened. Perhaps it was the confined space, the sudden appearance of Dr. Bellwether rising from a stool inside the room, the accumulated stress of the car ride and the waiting room stairs. Whatever the trigger, Storm's precarious composure shattered. With a sudden, explosive burst of adrenaline-fueled panic, Storm twisted, lowered its body, and yanked backwards with astonishing force. The leash handle ripped through Noah's grasp, stinging his palm. Before Noah could react, Storm spun and bolted back down the hallway towards the waiting room, a low, panicked growl tearing from its throat. Chaos erupted instantly, amplifying the contained pandemonium of the previous visit. The woman with the magazine shrieked and jumped onto her chair, clutching her purse. The teenager scrambled backwards, tripping over his own feet. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The dachshund barked shrilly from its owner's arms. "Storm! No! Stop!" Noah yelled, stumbling as he turned, raw panic seizing him. Storm, a blur of frantic motion, zigzagged through the waiting room, dodging chairs, skidding on the linoleum floor. Its eyes were wild, dilated with terror. It wasn't running to anywhere, just away from the perceived trap of the exam room. The quick-thinking veterinary assistant, Leo, burst out of another room, alerted by the commotion. "Whoa! Hey!" He immediately moved to block the main exit, anticipating Storm's trajectory. Storm saw the blocked escape route and veered sharply, scrabbling towards the cluttered retail corner near Chloe's desk, filled with displays of pet toys and prescription diets. Bags of food tumbled, toys scattered. "I'll try to corner him," Leo called out, moving strategically. Noah, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, joined the chase, calling Storm's name, trying to sound calm, but hearing the panic in his own voice. "Storm, it's okay. Easy, boy, easy." The chase was short but frantic. Leo, surprisingly agile, managed to gently herd the terrified creature into the alcove behind the reception desk, effectively trapping it between the desk, a filing cabinet, and himself. Storm pressed itself against the wall, trembling violently, sides heaving, emitting a series of high-pitched, distressed yelps that sounded nothing like the nocturnal howls. Noah reached the alcove, panting heavily, his face flushed. Leo was already kneeling, speaking in a low, calm, continuous murmur. "Okay, little fella, easy now, easy does it. You're okay, just got spooked, didn't you?" Slowly, cautiously, avoiding direct eye contact, Leo extended a hand. Noah knelt beside him, adding his own soft reassurances. After several tense moments, during which Storm's frantic trembling began to subside into exhausted shivers, Leo was able to gently but firmly grasp the trailing end of the makeshift harness. He didn't try to lift Storm immediately, just re-establish contact, letting the creature feel the security of restraint without aggression. Breathing heavily, Leo looked up at Noah. "Got him. Wow, strong little guy?" Noah nodded, relief making his knees weak. He looked around the waiting room. The woman was still perched on her chair. The teenager was retrieving his scattered belongings. Chloe looked shaken, but was already starting to tidy the retail display. The weight of embarrassment washed over Noah again, hot and prickling. He offered a series of breathless, inadequate apologies to the room at large. "So sorry, really sorry. He's never done this before. Just terrified." Leo carefully scooped up the now limp, unresisting Storm. "Let's get him into the exam room quickly," he said quietly to Noah. "Less stress for everyone." They walked back down the hallway, Leo carrying Storm securely, Noah trailing like a chastened shadow. Dr. Bellwether stood in the doorway of exam room 3, his expression unreadable. A mixture of professional concern, perhaps a touch of exasperation, and undeniable heightened curiosity. "Well," Dr. Bellwether said, his voice dry as he stepped aside to let them enter. "Second time's the charm, perhaps? Let's get this door shut." He closed it firmly behind Noah, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet room. The air inside felt thick with adrenaline and unanswered questions. Storm, still cradled in Leo's arms, let out a low, pitiful whine. Noah met Dr. Bellwether's steady gaze, his own eyes pleading for answers, for an end to the escalating madness. The examination hadn't even begun, and already everything felt irrevocably out of control. Dr. Bellwether directed Leo to place Storm on the cold, stainless steel examination table. Leo did so gently, keeping one hand firmly but reassuringly on the creature's back, while Dr. Bellwether pulled on a fresh pair of nitrile gloves with a decisive snap. The vet's movements were deliberate, radiating a calm professionalism that acted as a small anchor in the churning sea of Noah's anxiety. Despite the chaotic entrance, Dr. Bellwether's focus was now entirely on the animal before him. "Okay, deep breaths, everyone," Dr. Bellwether said, his voice even. He glanced at Noah. "Including you, Noah. Let's try to keep the energy calm for our friend here." He then addressed Storm in a low, soothing tone, avoiding direct eye contact initially. "All right there, little one. Let's just take a look, see what's going on." He began the examination methodically, his experienced hands moving with a combination of gentleness and diagnostic purpose. He started with a visual assessment, circling the table slowly, observing Storm's posture, respiration, coat condition, and overall conformation from different angles. He noted the distinct slope of the back, higher at the shoulders and tapering towards the hindquarters, a characteristic often masked when the animal was curled up or moving quickly. He paid close attention to the large, rounded ears, capable of independent rotation, and the relatively long, thick neck. Storm stood rigidly on the table, muscles bunched, head lowered slightly, eyes constantly scanning the room, tracking every movement Dr. Bellwether made. Leo maintained his calming presence, murmuring softly and stroking Storm's flank rhythmically. Dr. Bellwether picked up his stethoscope, warming the diaphragm in his hand before gently placing it against Storm's chest. He listened intently, moving the stethoscope to different locations, assessing heart rate, rhythm, and lung sounds. "Heart rate's elevated, understandably," he murmured, mostly to himself. "Lungs sound clear, though." He proceeded to palpate Storm's body, feeling for any swelling, tenderness, or abnormalities in the abdomen, limbs, and spine. His fingers probed gently but firmly, assessing muscle tone and skeletal structure. He noted the surprising density of the creature's build beneath the somewhat scruffy fur. He carefully examined the paws, noting the blunt, non-retractable claws, more like those of a dog than a cat, but thick and strong. Then came the closer inspection of the head. He gently tilted Storm's head up, examining the eyes with a small ophthalmoscope, checking pupil response. He felt along the jawline, noting the powerful masseter muscles. He carefully lifted the lips again, this time for a much more thorough examination of the teeth than the brief glimpse during the chaos. This was where his professional mask showed the first definitive crack. His eyebrows shot up. He leaned closer, his expression shifting from routine examination to intense, focused scrutiny. "Leo," he said, his voice tight with dawning realization, "hand me the otoscope. Use the large speculum." Leo passed him the instrument. Dr. Bellwether didn't use it on the ears. Instead, he used its bright light to get an even better view inside Storm's mouth. He meticulously examined the dental arcade. The prominent cone-shaped canines were obvious, but it was the premolars and molars that solidified his suspicion. Exceptionally large premolars, clearly adapted for crushing bone, and carnassial teeth designed for shearing tough hides and meat. This was the dentition of a highly specialized carnivore, far removed from any domestic dog or even common wild North American canids, like foxes or coyotes. He straightened up slowly, pulling off his gloves with another sharp snap. The pieces, the sloping back, the thick neck, the rounded ears, the non-retractable claws, the powerful jaw muscles, and now, decisively, the teeth, clicked into place with startling certainty. He looked at Storm, no longer seeing a strange puppy, but recognizing the juvenile form of a species utterly alien to this continent. His gaze swung to Noah, sharp and penetrating. The earlier questions about diet and behavior suddenly carried immense weight. He picked up the clipboard again, but his questions were no longer exploratory. They were confirmatory, tinged with an urgency that made Noah's blood run cold. "Noah," he began, his voice low and serious, dropping all pretense of routine inquiry. "The howling you described, was it a series of whoops, maybe rising in pitch? Sometimes interspersed with sounds like laughter?" Noah stared, bewildered by the specificity. "Yes, exactly. How did you know? And the pacing? Relentless back and forth? Constantly, like clockwork. Any digging behavior? Trying to bury things even indoors?" Noah thought back. "Actually, yes. He tried to dig at the corner of the rug a few times, and I found a sock half buried under the cushion of the armchair." He dismissed it as weird puppy behavior. Dr. Bellwether nodded slowly, his eyes grave. He glanced at Leo, who looked equally baffled but trusting of the vet's line of questioning. Dr. Bellwether took a deep breath, ran a hand through his graying hair again, a gesture Noah now recognized as processing profound surprise, and turned his full attention back to Noah. He didn't waste words. He didn't soften the blow. "Noah," Dr. Bellwether stated, his voice resonating with the weight of the improbable truth, "I understand this is going to sound impossible, but based on the morphology, the dentition, and the behaviors you're describing, this isn't a dog. It's not a fox, not a coyote, not a wolf hybrid." He paused, letting the negations hang in the air, clearing the slate before delivering the stunning conclusion. "You found a baby hyena, a spotted hyena to be precise." The words slammed into Noah, sucking the air from his lungs. Hyena. The word conjured images from nature documentaries, Serengeti plains, cackling scavengers, powerful predators running down wildebeest. It was a creature of Africa, of folklore, of a world impossibly distant from his quiet corner of North Carolina. He gaped at Dr. Bellwether, then at the small, tense creature on the table, Storm, trying desperately to map the exotic label onto the familiar yet strange animal he'd been living with. His mind struggled to bridge the chasm between the two realities. "A hyena," Noah stammered, the word feeling thick and alien on his tongue. "Here, how is that even possible?" Dr. Bellwether's expression was sympathetic but serious. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's highly probable he's a victim of the illegal, exotic pet trade. Smuggled into the country, perhaps escaped or was deliberately released nearby when the owner couldn't handle him. It happens more often than you'd think, unfortunately. Malnourished and stressed as he was when you found him, his appearance was deceptive. He gestured toward Storm. But there's no doubt in my mind now. Every clinical sign points to crocuta crocuta. The clinical detachment of the Latin name felt surreal. Noah looked at Storm with entirely new eyes. The watchful intelligence, the strange sounds, the powerful little body, it all coalesced into a terrifying, fascinating, and profoundly problematic whole. A hyena, sleeping in his house, howling its alien calls into the Appalachian night. The ground felt unsteady beneath his feet. The revelation, hyena, echoed in the sudden, heavy silence of the examination room. Noah felt dizzy, leaning a hand against the cool metal of the counter for support. His mind struggled to process the sheer improbability. A spotted hyena, native to sub-Saharan Africa, found shivering under a rhododendron bush in western North Carolina after a thunderstorm. It sounded like the premise of a bizarre fever dream, not his actual life. Dr. Bellwether, seeing Noah's shock, immediately shifted from diagnostician to crisis manager. His voice remained calm, authoritative, cutting through Noah's disorientation. "Okay, Noah, let's take this step by step. The most important thing right now is ensuring Storm's welfare and public safety. We absolutely cannot release him back into the wild here. He's not native, wouldn't survive, and could pose risk to local wildlife and potentially people. And keeping him is not an option, legally or ethically." He was already reaching for the phone on the wall. "I need to make 2 calls immediately. First, the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They handle situations involving exotic or dangerous animals. Second, I'll reach out to my contacts at the North Carolina Zoo and a reputable large carnivore sanctuary located just outside the state. We need to find the most appropriate facility with the expertise and resources to care for a young hyena." As Dr. Bellwether began the first call, speaking in low, urgent tones, explaining the extraordinary situation to a doubtless incredulous official on the other end, he gestured to Leo. "Leo, let's get that secure transport kennel again. The large one we used for the leopard seal incident last year. Make sure it's thoroughly cleaned and ready. We need secure containment, humane but escape-proof." Noah flinched at the word leopard seal incident, a stark reminder that this quiet suburban clinic sometimes dealt with the truly unexpected. The mention of the cage, however necessary, still felt like a betrayal. "He seems so scared, Doctor," Noah protested weakly, watching Storm, who stood frozen on the table, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the rising tension. "Isn't there a less stressful way?" Dr. Bellwether covered the phone receiver, his expression firm but understanding. "Noah, I cannot stress this enough. He is a wild predator, hardwired with powerful instincts. Right now he's young, likely habituated to some extent by your care, and clearly stressed. But hyenas are incredibly strong, even as juveniles. Their bite force is immense. If he panics again or feels threatened as strangers arrive to transport him, the situation could become dangerous very quickly. For him, for you, for my staff, for the wildlife officers. The secure kennel is the safest, most responsible way to manage this transition. It minimizes risk for everyone involved and ensures he can be moved safely to a facility equipped for his long-term needs." He turned back to his call, relaying details. Location found, estimated age based on dentition, likely 4 to 6 months, current condition. Noah listened, numbly absorbing the clinical assessment of the creature he'd come to know simply as Storm. 4 to 6 months old, already possessing the potential for lethal force. Leo returned, wheeling in the heavy-duty kennel. It was significantly larger and more robust than the standard dog crates, made of thick plastic with reinforced metal bars on the door and ventilation openings. He lined it with fresh, soft blankets and secured a heavy ceramic water bowl inside. While Dr. Bellwether finished his call with Wildlife Resources and immediately dialed the sanctuary director, He instructed Leo and Noah on how to carefully maneuver Storm into the kennel. Slow movements, no sudden gestures. Talk calmly. Leo, you guide him from behind. Noah, maybe you can coax him gently from the front? He trusts you more. Noah approached the table, his heart aching. He spoke softly to Storm, using the same soothing tones he'd used that first night in the rain. Okay, Storm, it's all right. Just need you to go in here for a little while. It's safe. He held out his hand near the kennel entrance. Storm watched him, head low, ears flicking nervously. He whined, a low, guttural sound of distress. But perhaps sensing Noah's familiarity amidst the surrounding tension, or maybe just exhausted from the earlier panic, he allowed Leo to gently guide him from behind. With a final, hesitant look at Noah, Storm stepped cautiously into the kennel. Leo swiftly but smoothly closed and latched the heavy door, securing the additional safety locks. Storm immediately retreated to the far back corner, turning his back to them, a small dark shape huddled against the plastic wall. Seeing him contained, officially categorized as exotic wildlife, no longer just the mysterious puppy under his care, felt like a physical blow to Noah. Dr. Bellwether hung up the phone, relief evident in his expression. Okay, wildlife officers are dispatching someone. They're as baffled as we are, but they're taking it seriously, and Director Anya Sharma at the Oak Creek Wildlife Sanctuary is preparing to receive him. They have experience with large African carnivores, including hyenas rescued from similar situations. It's the best possible outcome for him, Noah. They can provide the social structure, diet, and environment he needs. He looked at Noah kindly. This must be a tremendous shock. Finding him, caring for him, forming a bond, only to discover this. It's a lot to process. Noah could only nod, swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat. He felt an overwhelming sense of dislocation, of grief almost. Grief for the lost puppy fantasy, grief for the bond he'd have to sever, guilt over his ignorance, and a profound sadness for Storm's bewildering journey and uncertain future, even in the best possible hands. How terrifying it must have been, ripped from his mother, smuggled across continents, abandoned in an alien landscape, only to be temporarily rescued by a clueless human before being caged again. Can I stay with him until the officers arrive? Noah asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Bellwether considered it, glancing at the kennel. Storm remained huddled, facing the back. All right, he conceded. Leo will move the kennel to the quiet isolation room. You can sit with him. Keep your voice low, stay calm. It might help ease his stress before the transport. Leo carefully wheeled the kennel out. Noah followed, feeling like he was walking towards an execution, not a rescue. He needed these last few moments, a chance to say goodbye to the creature that had turned his predictable life upside down. The small, wild Storm child who had inadvertently taught him about the vast, complex, and often heartbreaking intersections between the human world and the untamed wild. The isolation room was small, windowless, and blessedly quiet. The air hummed faintly with the sound of ventilation, carrying the sterile scent of disinfectant. Leo positioned the heavy kennel against one wall, checked the water bowl again, and gave Noah a sympathetic nod before slipping out, closing the door softly behind him. Noah sank onto the cool tile floor, leaning his back against the opposite wall, facing the kennel. The only sounds were his own breathing and the almost imperceptible rustle as Storm shifted slightly in the back of the cage. The harsh fluorescent light overhead felt clinical and unforgiving. He sat there in silence for a long time, the minutes stretching out, thick with unspoken emotions. He felt hollowed out, exhausted by the adrenaline roller coaster of the past hour, the past week. He looked at the sturdy plastic box holding the small hyena, a creature born to roam vast African savannas, now confined in a sterile room in suburban North Carolina. The absurdity, the tragedy of it felt immense. He thought about the past week, the initial shock and empathy in the storm, the growing unease, the baffling behaviors, the late-night howls that had seemed so alien, the strange comfort he'd occasionally found in Storm's quiet, watchful presence. He'd complained about the disruption to his ordered life, but now facing the imminent absence of this wild enigma, he felt a profound sense of loss. He hadn't just been harboring a hyena, he'd been unknowingly participating in a story far larger and stranger than his own. Guilt gnawed at him. Had he done the right thing, bringing Storm here? Yes, intellectually, he knew it was necessary. Storm couldn't stay with him, but emotionally, it felt like a betrayal. He had offered sanctuary only to lead Storm to this cage. He felt responsible for the fear Storm had shown, for the stress of the chase, the examination, the confinement. Slowly, tentatively, Storm stirred within the kennel. The hyena turned around, its movements cautious in the confined space. It crept towards the wire mesh door, stopping just behind it, watching Noah with those large, dark, unnervingly intelligent eyes. The frantic terror from earlier had subsided, replaced by a wary, watchful uncertainty. "Hey, Storm," Noah whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Hey, buddy." He didn't move closer, just held the creature's gaze. He spoke softly, rambling, needing to fill the silence, needing to somehow convey his complex feelings to an animal that couldn't possibly understand his words, but might perhaps grasp the intent, the sorrow in his tone. "I'm so sorry this happened," he murmured. "Sorry you got scared. Sorry about all of this. I didn't know what you were. I just wanted to help." He talked about the storm, about finding him under the bush, about the warm milk, the failed attempts at playing fetch. "You were never much of a puppy, were you?" he added, a sad smile flickering on his lips. Storm watched him, head tilted slightly, ears swiveling almost imperceptibly, taking in the sound of his voice. There was no fear in his eyes now, just a deep, quiet awareness. Noah felt a connection, a fragile thread of understanding spanning the vast gulf between their species, woven from shared moments of vulnerability and proximity. "They're taking you somewhere better," Noah continued, needing to believe it himself. "Somewhere with others like you. Somewhere you can be a hyena. Run around, do hyena things. No more scary vet clinics. No more weird guys trying to make you fetch squeaky toys." He fell silent again, the weight of the impending farewell settling heavily in the small room. He edged slightly closer on the floor, stopping a couple of feet from the kennel. He could smell the faint, musky scent of Storm, an odor both wild and strangely familiar now. After a long pause, Storm took another hesitant step forward, pressing his nose against the wire mesh of the door, closer to Noah. The hyena made a low, soft sound, not a whine or a growl, but a quiet exhalation, almost a sigh. Impulsively, carefully, Noah reached out his hand, extending his fingers slowly toward the mesh, stopping just short of touching it. "It was an adventure, Storm," he whispered. "Unexpected, confusing, terrifying sometimes." Storm watched his hand, then mirroring the gesture from their very first tentative encounter, the hyena nudged its nose against the wire, directly opposite Noah's fingers. Noah held his breath as Storm extended his rough pink tongue through the mesh and gave Noah's fingertip a single, deliberate lick. It wasn't a gesture of affection in the human sense, perhaps, but it felt like acknowledgement, recognition, a connection affirmed, even as it was about to be broken. Storm then pressed the side of his head gently against the wire near Noah's hand. A fleeting moment of quiet contact. Tears pricked Noah's eyes, blurring the image of the small, captive creature before him. He felt a profound ache in his chest, a mixture of sorrow for the parting and a strange, fierce pride in having played a small role in this animal's survival. However brief and misguided his initial efforts had been, he knew he was doing the right thing, the necessary thing, but it hurt nonetheless. He heard footsteps approaching in the corridor outside, voices murmuring, the wildlife officers. Time was up. "Okay, Storm," Noah whispered, pulling his hand back slowly. "Be brave. Be strong." He looked at the hyena, memorizing the shape of its strange, beautiful face, the depth of its dark eyes. "Goodbye." He stood up on shaky legs just as the door opened and two uniformed wildlife resources officers entered, followed by Dr. Bellwether. Their expressions were professional, but tinged with the same sense of incredulity Dr. Bellwether had initially shown. They carried transport equipment and paperwork. Noah stepped back, giving them space, feeling like an unnecessary bystander now. He watched as they efficiently but gently secured the kennel for transport, confirming Storm's details with Dr. Bellwether. He didn't watch them wheel the kennel away. He turned, facing the blank wall, listening to the receding sounds, the rattle of the kennel wheels, the quiet closing of doors, the murmur of voices fading down the hallway. Then, silence. The isolation room felt vast and empty. Storm was gone. The whirlwind adventure was over, leaving behind a profound quiet, a lingering sense of wonder, and the indelible memory of a small, wild creature who had briefly, improbably, shared his home and changed his perception of the world forever. He had rescued what he thought was a puppy, only to discover the wild heart of Africa beating unexpectedly in his own backyard. And in letting it go, he felt both loss and a quiet, aching sense of having finally, truly helped.